At this time, I will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone to this regular meeting of the Marshall City Council. A number of the council members are connected by distance, so I will ask the city clerk, Kyle Box, to take the roll call.
Mayor Burns.
Here.
Craig Schaefer.
Here.
Steve Meister.
Yep, here.
Glenn Bearcoller.
Here.
John DeCramer.
Here.
Russ Labatt.
Here.
Jim Lazinski.
Here.
And the council is all present. We will then move to consider the agenda that we have before us. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, well, the one change or the addition I'll add to the agenda on agenda item number 5 under the consent agenda, there are actually 2 additional dates that are being requested. So that, the dates listed are November 27, 28, December 4 and 5. We add to that December 18th to 19th. That was just an omission. So that should be December 18th and 19th. Any other additions, deletions to the agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. We'll consider then agenda item number 2, which would be to consider the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting that was held on October 27th. The council does have the minutes of that meeting. Are there any corrections?
Move to approve.
Meeting minutes.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Steve to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Kyle, will you take the vote?
Mayor Burns.
Yes.
Craig Schaefer.
Yes.
Steve Meister.
Yes.
Glenn Bearcoller.
Yes.
John DeCramer.
Yes.
Russ Labatt.
Yes.
Jim Lazinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. Move then to agenda item number 3, which is a public hearing. There's a public hearing on the project proposed for James Avenue, Camden Drive reconstruction project. We will conduct the public hearing. Following the public hearing, we will then consider the resolution that would order the improvement and the preparation of the plans. I will call on Jason Anderson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, to conduct this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is a reconstruction project that consists of complete reconstruction of James Avenue as identified in the map in front of you and Camden Drive, as well as stormwater pipe improvements across the golf course property out to the river. In James Avenue, we'd propose to replace the water main, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer. And on Camden Drive, we would propose to replace the surfacing and the catch basin leads in that section. We did notify property owners of this meeting tonight, that the public hearing is tonight. We also held a public informational meeting with property owners on October 15th at the Merit Center and had attendance available via Zoom. We did have a few property owners that did attend that meeting, as well as a councilman. The engineer's estimate for this project is about 1.2 million, including contingency and engineering costs. We would propose to special assess the project in accordance with the latest special assessment policy, and the wastewater, surface water, and Marshall Municipal Utilities would all pay their portion of the project cost for their respective utilities. That's all I've got, unless there are questions.
Okay, thank you, Jason. We'll put it up for input as part of this public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, Jason, I have a question for you. This is Councilman Russ Labatt. I have a question for you on page 18 of the council packet, or page 2 of the feasibility report. You've got the existing street width on James Avenue is generally 40 feet as measured from back of curb to back of curb. You go to the next page under 3.0 proposed improvements. The proposed roadway is 36-foot travel. Then about the second sentence or third sentence down in that same paragraph, you said the proposed segment of James Avenue will be 3 foot narrower than the existing street. Is it 4 feet narrower or 3 feet narrower?
Thank you, Councilman. That highlights a good point that I should have mentioned in my brief presentation. Camden Drive, we would propose to put back in the same width as it is today. James, we were proposing to put that back 3 foot narrower would be the correct dimension. The existing road is 40 feet as measured from the back of the curb. The proposed road would be 37 feet as measured from the back of the curb, 36 feet as measured from the face or the front of the curb. So we are proposing a slight narrowing on this road section, and we're also proposing 7 foot wide sidewalks on each side as opposed to 5, being that it's back of curb walk. We thought since we are creating a little additional space that we would give that back to the sidewalk. That might help in the wintertime.
Thank you for that clarification. And again, I'll state that on record that as earlier this year or last year, I was, on 4th Street and again on 1st Street, I'm opposed to the narrowing of the city streets. I just don't think that's a right move on the city. I don't have any problem with new developments making the streets narrower, but I think that existing streets should be kept at the existing width. So just to let you know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other input as part of the public hearing?
I just want to add some stuff. When we had this discussion at, I think it was PIT, the 7 foot sidewalk, and I know Jason, you can confirm when I say this, but we're not, as a city, I don't believe we're going to enforce the homeowners blowing the full 7 foot sidewalk. I'm correct in saying that, right? Jason, what we discussed?
That's correct. What we're interested in is a pedestrian access route being maintained, and that's 4 feet through here.
4 feet. So it gives 3 feet for snow. So it would end up with a situation like we have on, I believe it's C Street, the line of street there, where we have a 5 foot sidewalk that snow, and that street really gets narrowed because of that. So just so the citizens know, we're not going to require the full 7 foot sidewalk being cleared.
Yep. Okay, good point. Other input as part of this public hearing?
Mr. Mayor, just another question for Jason. Jason, have we had any further correspondence with the golf course? Because again, the proposed project schedule is, like I stated last meeting, it's cut in right through their golf season. So I'm just curious if we've had any further conversation with them.
Yes, Councilman, we have via phone and email, but we're mostly just trying to set up the next opportunity to meet. And we will be meeting this Friday with some board members and the superintendent to discuss concerns and project considerations. It's our goal to try to accommodate their schedule the best that we can, understanding that we're still there will be some disruptions, but maybe there's some key dates that we can try to minimize our disruption or be done or not have started by then. Also look at different items like seeding and irrigation and how we can handle those things to get the golf course a product back that they had before and try to minimize our disruption. So we'll be meeting on Friday to start that discussion. We've started it. We'll continue it on Friday.
Thank you, Jason. I also want to say thanks again for bringing these projects to us earlier so we can bid them and hopefully get favorable bids on the project. Thank you.
Other input as part of the public hearing?
The only other input I'd like to add, and I respect Russ's opinion on streets. I understand that we have 40-foot streets, but as Jason and I have chatted, and I've also paid attention, 40-foot streets are extremely wide in residential areas now as a standard. I happen to own a duplex up in Superior, Wisconsin, so I dropped the tape on that street. That street's 30 feet. We're building some houses in Buffalo, Minnesota. Those streets are also 30 feet wide. So even at 36 feet, we are still, I believe, and Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're still above average for residential streets in communities typical of Minnesota. Am I correct in saying that?
It's really all across the board. There are plenty of streets in a lot of communities that are more narrow. We looked at this street section being so short and not a through route that with such minimal amount of traffic, you really should only be driving it if you live there. It shouldn't be a primary route. with Camden being available and different other routes that you can take. So we think that 36 will still provide adequate level of service and still provide enough width for parking and emergency vehicles. And we believe it'll be adequate.
Well, and the other points I'm trying to make is we talk about budget, and as I have visited with Sharon about not increasing our levy very high this year. I don't want to throw a number out there yet because that's another discussion. If we're going to keep lowering our budget, we do have to start taking stuff out someplace. Street maintenance on a 36-foot street is cheaper than a 40-foot street. We can keep 40-foot streets, but we better be prepared to increase our levy 5-6% instead of 1 to 2%. It's just a simple math of having more streets, more products to take care of.
Yes, Councilman, if I can add into that, every time we review our special assessment policy, the city is taking a larger and larger share of the cost. So the more that we can take a look at these costs and try to keep them down as much as possible, the better off it is for our bottom line, for sure.
Other input is part of the public hearing?
Yeah,
John?
just a comment on that, Jason, when you bring up assessments, this is going to have a pretty sizable impact to the city because there's a lot of street there that is not going to be able to be assessed to a property owner. Pretty much the whole length of Camden on the one side, and really there's quite a bit around the church and everything else. So whether that's capped or not might be another question. So.
That's correct. This will be a fairly expensive project for the city.
And any other input? Sharon?
Mr. Mayor, we did have noted by our engineer prior to this meeting in a short conversation, just to remind the council on Minnesota Statutes 429 that when following this process and in order to award a contract, following the hearing, we do need to have a 4/5 approval in order to proceed. That would mean we would need 6 yay votes for this project to proceed.
Thank you, Sharon. Any other input? If not, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Also move.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. We'll now consider the resolution ordering the improvements and the preparation of the plans. This is what Sharon was referring to when this does take a 4/5 vote to proceed on ordering the improvement and the preparation of the plans. Any questions about the resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I
Move to
move the
approve.
resolution ordering the improvement and preparation of plans.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
No.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass on 4/5 vote. We will move then to the consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda this evening. And they include the wastewater treatment facility improvement project. We have an application for payment to Magni Construction. We have a payment invoice to American Engineering Testing, and we have a payment invoice to Bolton and Maine. Also on the consent agenda, consider the approval for sale of alcohol beverages at the Red Baron Arena for November 27th, 28th, December 4th and 5th, and December 18th and 19th. And then on the consent agenda would be the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Number 5, please, Mr. Mayor.
Any other item?
Number 4, please.
Okay. The remaining item on the consent agenda is number 6.
I move approval of paying the bills and project payments.
Motion by Craig.
Second by
Seconded
Meister.
Steve. Discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote on agenda item number 6.
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
yes,
John DeCramer,
yes,
Russ Labatt,
yes,
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And motion passes. Agenda item number 4, the wastewater treatment facilities payment invoices. Jim, you have a question?
I don't have a question. I know the public always questions change orders, and I just would like to point out we're 11.2 million into this project to date with 0 change orders. So there are not saying there won't be some, but there are projects that do go in the city of Marshall as bid. Maybe I'm knocking on wood, but I just wanted to point out to the public that we're virtually, give or take, 2/3 done with this project, and it is right on track there would be without any major snags. And I just want to make a point of that. So with that, I'll approve this payment, or I'll make a motion to approve this payment.
I'll second that.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion? Good point that you're bringing up, Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
yes,
John DeCramer,
yes,
Russ Labatt, Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. Agenda item number 5, consider the approval of the sale of alcohol beverages on those 3 weekends at the Red Baron Arena. Russ?
I think we lost Russ.
Russ, you're muted.
this is Glenn. I just have a quick question here too on this. What exactly is the motion? Is it to approve the permit? Or is it to approve the permit with the fees waived? Because it doesn't really indicate which one it is. And the applicant has requested that the fees be waived. So exactly what is the motion?
Kyle?
The way this is presented, like Councilmember Bearcooler stated that the applicant has requested to waive the fees, so the motion would be to waive the fees.
And approve the permit.
Correct.
Okay.
Russ, you're back?
no, I'm not back. I'll be there in a minute.
We can see and hear you, Russ.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I lost it on my computer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just bringing forth, first of all, I want to state I'm not opposed to the approval of the alcoholic beverages. I have had some conversations with Cassie at CVB, with Kyle at the city offices, and also Jim Marshall. Since this is a relatively new ordinance that we're looking at, I'm going to ask Dennis for a little advice probably. Since it is a public event, on section 6221, it says the sponsor and the on-sale intoxicating liquor license shall both be responsible for adherence to all laws and requirements of this section, including the following. You go to the next page, number 8. It said law enforcement officers. As determined by the Director of Public Safety, such number of law enforcement officers as the Director of Public Safety may require or other security personnel as approved by the Director of Public Safety shall be on duty at the event during all times that alcoholic beverages are being sold or dispensed. The sponsoring individual or organization shall be responsible for securing and compensating such law enforcement officers or approved security personnel at the prevailing rates. Again, this is a new ordinance, I believe. And in talking to Jim Marshall, we've never had any issues in the past, but I think this is our first public event. So is it going to require that we have safety officers there at all times, or can they just be on call? Or who is actually going to be responsible? So I just a clarification, and maybe we, I don't know, I'm confused. Thank you.
I pardon me. I too am confused. I'm not certain that we've ever required or demanded that we have personnel on site at all times. And I think this is more probably a staffing issue for the public safety department, that maybe they just need to be on call.
Based on the direction of the Director of Public Safety.
Yes. Yeah.
And I agree with you, Dennis, because the very first sentence, and Kyle pointed that out to me. Thank you, Kyle. It says, as determined by the Director of Public Safety. I mean, may require. So I don't have a problem with it. It's just that if we need a clarification in the ordinance, and again, this is the first time we're handling this with a quote unquote public event. So maybe just that we're all on the same page and we're also all aware of it. So.
And
Otherwise,
yeah, just,
Oops, go ahead.
okay, sorry. And just my understanding of that too is that that gives him the latitude that it's event specific. If he feels that there may be a potential issue or problem, then he has the discretion to place officers there or to leave them on call.
And to be reimbursed for that cost.
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to relaunch my Zoom. So, but I'll
And
make,
hey,
I'll
Russ,
make a
just
motion
as
to
a-
approve.
And I'll second that. And just as a second for further discussion, Mr. Mayor, too, I know that, like, for instance, the city of New Ulm, we've actually rented their community center and served alcoholic beverages at an event there. And the discussion with their public safety also is depending on the nature of it. And we used two of their fire department personnel as paid bartenders. And then that gave the law enforcement another level of comfort. So it's very similar to how other communities treat that same type of ordinance.
Okay, so Russ, you made that motion? Is that correct?
Yes.
So that motion was made by Russ, seconded by Craig. Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
No,
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. We're done with the consent agenda, so we'll move to agenda item number 7. This is a MnDOT update about the upcoming Trunk Highway 19 College Drive reconstruction project. Jason Anderson, our Director of Public Works, I'll call on you to introduce the presenter from MnDOT.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I think I'll be handing this over to Jesse Vlamic. He's taking over for Gene East as our project manager. I know he'll be accompanied by Nikki Farrington of SEH, the design consultants, and some other MnDOT staff as well. I know Mandy Lighthizer Schmidt is online, and so is Lindsay Brewer, and they'll all be kind of, I think, pitching in to discuss the 60% layout plans and their vision going forward for the corridor. So Jesse, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Mr. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for this opportunity to present the current layout for College Drive Highway 19. Real quickly, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, Jesse.
Okay, perfect. So as Jason said, my name is Jesse Vlamic, the new MnDOT project manager for the project. Also with me, Nikki Farrington from SEH, Lindsay Brewer, our MnDOT planning director, and Mandy Lighthizer Schmidt, public engagement coordinator. Although new to the project, I did participate in some of the initial engagements that took place approximately a year ago, and have spent time with Gene East just getting acclimated to the project. Next slide. So topics for today, we'd like to review the current layout, and I will walk through the current layout in a story map form. This should be available online for the public on November 11th. We will share feedback from the demonstration project. Lindsay will explain the demonstration project and share the public survey responses. Upcoming public outreach, I and Mandy will touch on what's coming up for public outreach. And then finally, we'll look at the next steps moving forward. Next slide. So as you are aware, MnDOT is planning to reconstruct College Drive, Highway 19 from 4th Street to Bruce Street in the city of Marshall in 2025, with many intersection improvements. You have given your initial support on a few, and we would like to get your comments and support on a few remaining ones. Next slide. This project is considering the following as part of the reconstruction: road improvements, intersection improvements, improvements to safety, improvements to pedestrians and bicyclists. Will replace city sewers or city utilities and improve the drainage. Next slide. We have analyzed each intersection along College Drive to make improvements to meet the community's priorities. Next. So, starting with the intersection of College Drive and 4th Street, bump outs will be added to all the corners of the intersection to improve safety for pedestrians. Next slide. What are bump outs? Bump outs are curb extensions that improve pedestrian safety by reducing crossing distances and increasing pedestrian visibility at all corners. Next. Timmerman Drive will be converted to a one-way roadway and will provide additional parking to the area. Next. Artillery Drive will be closed to eliminate conflict points and improve safety along College Drive, Highway 19. Next slide. At the junction of College Drive, Country Club Drive, and South 2nd Street, a roundabout will be constructed. Next. Why a roundabout? A roundabout will enhance safety and reduce traffic delays. It will also accommodate all vehicle types and include enhancements for pedestrians. Next. At the intersection of College Drive and Greeley Street, bump outs will be added to the north side to reduce pedestrian crossing distance and improve safety. Next. At the intersection of College Drive and Saratoga Street, the signal will remain. The dedicated right turn lanes on College Drive will be removed, but motorists can still make a right turn. A bump out will be added to the northwest corner. At the intersection of College Drive and Marvin Swan Memorial Drive, this intersection will be changed to a right in and a right out with a raised concrete median. At the intersection of College Drive and Main Street, this intersection will remain signalized and include a bump out in the northwest corner, along with improvements at all intersection corners to better accommodate truck turning. At the intersection of College Drive and Lion Street, the signal will be replaced with stop signs on Lion Street, and bump outs will be added to reduce pedestrian crossing distances. Next, just east of Lion Street, a pedestrian refuge with a marked crosswalk and RFB. A median will serve as a refuge for pedestrians crossing College Drive, and the RFB will also provide additional visibility to pedestrians crossing at this location. Next slide. What is an RFB? It is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, a safety measure with flashing signals to alert drivers of pedestrians crossing. At the intersection of College Drive and Marshall Street, this intersection will be changed to a right in, right out with a raised concrete median, and bump outs will be added to reduce pedestrian crossing distances. On College Drive, between the intersections of 3rd Street and Park Avenue, there will be a raised concrete median. The raised concrete median provides refuge for pedestrians crossing at 3rd Street and Park Avenue that provide direct connection to Liberty Park. Next slide. At the intersection of College Drive and High Street, a pedestrian refuge with a marked crosswalk and RFB. A median will serve as a refuge for the pedestrians crossing College Drive, and the RFB will also provide additional visibility for pedestrians crossing at this location. This is the location that we did the demonstration project with paint to represent the raised median and tube delineators to depict the curb and other height items such as signs. Lindsay Brewer is here to share the survey results. Lindsay?
Thanks, Jesse. And if you go to the next slide. Okay, so if you didn't get a chance to see the demonstration project while it was up, this is what it looked like after we installed the paint and the tube delineators. And maybe just a little bit of history here. We chose this location because of our efforts with the school over the years. We had heard that this was a spot where enhanced safety was desired, and in coordination with the city's transportation alternatives application a couple of years ago to install an RRFB that's coming up here pretty soon. And because we had this reconstruction project coming in the near future, so we could make a permanent improvement. So this is what it looked like as a demonstration. And the next slide will show what a median island could look like if it was permanently installed. So you'll see that it does not have to have the tube delineators, which were, I think, where we got a lot of our feedback from on the survey results. And it can include plantings. Of course, that would be up to the city to maintain. So oftentimes we don't see those, but they can look a number of different ways once they are installed and not have those vertical tube delineators there. Next slide, please. So just some highlights of the benefits, and Jesse had talked about a number of these, including the reducing the roadway length for people walking when they're crossing the street. It does increase visibility to the drivers of the pedestrians, and the medians specifically versus just the bump outs, which also shorten the distance, but a median allows that two-stage crossing. So pedestrians only have to cross one direction of traffic at a time, and they can take a break and then make their next movement across the other leg of traffic. It also does some traffic calming by reducing speeds for vehicles. And it does help eliminate right side passing. So if a vehicle is taking a left and a car goes around them, we know that at that time can be a frequent time where pedestrians will get struck by a vehicle because the car behind didn't see the pedestrian, or if the first vehicle was stopping for the pedestrian and the vehicle behind goes around, that can be a very dangerous time for pedestrians, and this would help with that. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see some of what folks in Marshall thought about the project. And keep in mind that, with surveys, not only in Marshall, but everywhere that we've done these, you do tend to get feedback that skews negative. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I would note that most respondents did not use the demonstration project. And then they gave feedback on it. So just, something to know as we're looking at the results. We asked if in general they could support the permanent installation of the median. And while a good number of people did say yes, there were more people that said no, and some were unsure, which, they maybe need more information. And this was a pretty quick demonstration project. So that is not atypical. The next slide asks about if drivers could support the installation. So kind of from a little bit different perspective, and the results were very similar. And then lastly, I summarized some of the comments that we had received, or some of the themes in the comments that we received. And I think overall there was some general confusion about what the bump out would look like in a permanent installation, because we got a lot of comments about the tube delineators and snow plows knocking those over and things like that. So I think if we were more clear about the delineators not being there, we probably would have lost half of the negative comments. Just, so there was some concern about losing the left turn lane onto High Street to the south. And this was one thing that we discussed as a MnDOT project team when we were first thinking about this demonstration project. And knowing that we wanted to prioritize the pedestrian movement in this location, given the school, and just, you know, working with Jason and other street staff over the years about people crossing here. In our discussions, the group of us and traffic engineers, design engineers included, we all agreed that prioritizing the pedestrian over the vehicle in this location was something that we were okay with. If it means losing a few seconds of vehicle mobility to help pedestrians safely cross the street, we were okay with that. And then we did hear a lot of concerns about snow removal, which is always a little bit funny, right? Because MnDOT does the snow removal and we're proposing this project. And just so you all know, we have worked very closely with our maintenance staff on the development of this project and the other demonstration projects that we've done around the district. And you know, I won't say that they love this, but we've worked with them and figured out how we can do snow removal, and they're on board. So that probably isn't as much of a concern as people thought. There was some discussion about the best location for this median, whether it was at High Street or Whitney. And with this one, we did do some outreach prior to putting the demonstration project here with the school, and they indicated High Street was the best spot because of where the kids come and get dropped off. And I will just say anecdotally, when we were out there installing the project, the demonstration project, we saw two people in the short time we were out there with multiple children crossing at High Street and not Whitney. And we didn't see any at Whitney. So I think it's the right location. And then just so you know, we did receive some very positive comments about how this would really help people cross the street, especially, parents with younger children. They were really excited to see something happen here. So you should know that as well. That wraps it up for the public survey responses.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. So continuing on with the last few segments there of the layout, South Whitney, South Hill, and South Minnesota streets will be narrowed to provide a better alignment with the street connections on the north side of College Drive. So just to recap, the layout takes into consideration roadway improvements, intersection improvements, drainage improvements, multimodal improvements, and city utility improvements. Next slide. Okay, so current public outreach. Individual property owner letters have gone out to property owners with access closures and or changes. I have had a few conversations with some landowners and property owners. I would suspect that I will have a few more phone calls and continue on with those conversations. We will be holding 2 listening sessions with the Chamber of Commerce on November 17th and the 18th at 8:30 to 9:30. Mandy, do you have any additional items or comments that you would like to mention or discuss?
Thank you, Jesse. I would just mention to council members that tonight is our rollout to the public. And starting tomorrow, we will send out social media ads, newspaper ads will start, stakeholder emails. So all of that promotion in terms of our online layout will start tomorrow and will run for 2 weeks, in which we'll be taking comments and questions in terms of what's been proposed to you this evening.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. So looking ahead, after today, we would like to gather the city and public's feedback on the layout in order to move forward. And you can see our time frame there after we're done with this evening's discussion. Between now and March of 2021, we would like to get the layout finalized or bring to the city for municipal consent. And during this whole time, we'd also be looking at streetscaping elements with the city and also working on cost sharing discussions. Is there, next slide.
Okay, well, thank you, Jesse. At this point, are you open for questions or input briefly from
Absolutely,
the council?
Absolutely. I have Nikki and Mandy and Jason as well knows lots what's going on with the layout. So by all means, ask away.
Okay, any input at this time?
I have a couple questions. As a gentleman who lives on South Whitney, on the corner of South Whitney there, I'll admit those turns off of College Drive onto the boulevards are horrible now. I drive bigger trucks. Most of the time I'm driving up on the boulevard because there's cars parked in front of those houses along College Drive. Who is responsible for addressing the parking like in front of every single corner house there on College Drive so we avoid the problems we have now with, you know, I drive a full-size pickup with 8-foot box with a snowplow on it. I can't make the turns.
May I kind of take this one, Jesse?
Absolutely.
I think if we go forward with the layout that you see in front of you, where we take those center medians and we taper them away up to the intersection, we would sign that no parking until you get back to the full width of the boulevard section. So on the city street, we would just be making the commitment to having no parking within 100 feet of the intersection or about whatever that is. So that's what I would say we would do, Councilman.
And that's a great idea. I mean, I think it's something we should maybe talk about in the very near future as it sits now. Like I said, as you know, with that, especially with that gas meter on High Street there, I think that's been, is it Higher Hill Street? Excuse me. I believe that's been clipped by a car before. So
Yes,
that would be, that's a good answer and a good point that we need to address.
Yeah, we would need to reach out to Great Plains. I believe it's their facility to get that moved in the event that we go through with this.
I just have a couple of comments. Since we've been reviewing these and looking at the proposals when, like Gene first brought this forward and traveling around the state, it's kind of like I drive tractor trailer also as my hobby. And I didn't like roundabouts until I figured out how to really use them. And now I really like roundabouts. And I've looked a lot at these center islands and the pedestrian sanctuaries and the bump outs, and I actually really appreciate that. There's a lot of people that, especially with the trucks that try to pass you on the right, and it's dangerous. I've had a number of people, I keep honking the horn because people almost get clipped and it's ridiculous. And I know that this is a change and we typically don't like change, but in my experience in driving through and seeing these, I think these are really positive moves forward, and it's just going to take some education and people are going to need to get used to them. But I think once they see them, they'll appreciate the full picture of it. And I really appreciate the design, and I'm actually in full support of this.
Thank you.
I would agree with you, Craig. And the other thing I think it'll help, and I think it was pointed out earlier in the discussion, is slowing traffic down. Traffic's very fast in College Drive. I'll use an example. I was driving. Yes, I was going about 10 miles over the speed limit. So he blew right by me. So I think it's good to put this stuff in to try to slow this traffic down.
You should have grabbed one more gear in that Mustang and they'd have never got past you.
No, Jim Marshall doesn't like me taking that out very fast. So
any other?
I support the design completely too. I'm with you, Craig.
Other input, John?
I do have a question on the roundabout. Is that it appears to be just a single lane roundabout? That's not a double lane, is it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Other input?
I have a question. When you did the surveys about the medians, there were more no's than yeses. after they're installed, do you do a survey to see if the results change much?
Lindsay, that's probably for you.
Yep. Yeah, we have not done that yet because this is our first time with the demonstration projects, but we could do a survey like that.
And Sharon.
I just want to reiterate just a comment about snow removal. And we do get feedback from the public about median snow removal. And this isn't the case for this project. I know with the J-turns, not all the time are all the lanes plowed, especially when you're turning. And I do think for your maintenance crew, it is a little bit different practice and procedures they would have to follow. But I just want to reiterate, we do get comments from the public about ensuring that there will be snow removal.
Okay. Any other input? Jesse, when do you intend to come forward with the streetscape designs?
We haven't really completely discussed that. Jason and I have talked a little bit about it. Nikki, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, hi, thank you. We have some ideas that we're going to be sharing here in the next month with Jason, and then kind of working through with him, coming back to you guys, probably when we come back to talk about the results of this next phase of outreach. When we come back to share what we've heard about the layout, we'll also share with you some ideas of some streetscape elements that we could implement as part of the layout.
Okay, thank you. Any other input? If not, thank you for your work. We look forward to this project in 2025, as well as all the planning that will happen up to that time. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
With that, I'll move us to the next agenda item number 8. This is an update on the water plant construction. Jeff, are you going to take the lead on this? Okay, so with us tonight is Jeff Larson, the superintendent of the water department at Marshall Municipal Utilities. Jeff?
Well, thanks, Council and Mayor, for having me tonight. The intent was to give an update earlier in the year. The hope was to do it in person after COVID subsided, but that hasn't happened. To recap, the community needs to meet the chloride limit by 2024. The most feasible way of doing this is by further softening the water delivered to Marshall. And the softening enhancement project is 75% complete. It's on budget and approximately 1 month behind. The overall capital cost is $11.6 million. $7 million provided by the state through a grant with the purpose of improving water quality discharge to the Redwood River. Remaining $4.6 million to be paid by the city and MMU. And the grant was expended in August, so we are now paying out of our own reserves, I guess. On the sign here, just point out, I guess a logo you don't see on that sign is KHC Construction of Marshall, who is the general contractor on the project. They've been busy along with their subs. Some of the local subs that are involved are Meyer Electric doing the electrical and the controls. Workman Mechanical is doing plumbing and HVAC. D&G is hauling aggregate and providing the aggregate for the project. R&G milling the asphalt. St. Aubin to the EFS on the sludge thickener. Buffalo Ridge provided concrete. Dunick is putting the asphalt down, and American Engineering and Testing, they're doing the quality control testing for the project. Next slide. There are 2 primary areas of construction involved with the project. There's an addition attached to the east end of the building and a standalone round building, which we refer to as a sludge thickener. This project involves little replacement or rehabilitating, much like the wastewater plant, or unlike the wastewater plant project. It's mostly new equipment and processes. So the project purpose is to further soften the water. What does that mean? As you know, the groundwater in this region is considered extremely hard. This hardness being caused by calcium and magnesium salts dissolved from the soil that the water percolates through. And the method of softening we use is called chemical precipitation. We add chemicals to the water to raise the pH, in our case, lime and soda ash. And by raising the pH, these dissolved salts come out of solution and are able to be settled out. The current plant partially lime softens. So we're using lime now to raise the pH to around 9.5. This is all that's needed to remove the carbonate hardness. We refer to that as easy hardness. Our raw water coming into the plant out of the wells is 55 grains per gallon, and it's currently softened to 35 grains per gallon. With this softening enhancement project, what we'll be doing is going after the non-carbonate hardness, what we refer to as the hard hardness, to go from that 35 grain level down to the 8 to 10 grain range. And to do this, we need to raise the pH to around 11. And with pH, it's not a linear progression. It's a logarithm that grows exponentially by a factor of 10 per each pH unit. For instance, to go from a pH 7 to a pH 8, that's 8 times as much. To go from a pH of 7 to a pH of 9, 100 times as much, and so on. So to make a long story short, we're going to be using a lot of chemical to get from 9.5 to 11. And also with the extra chemical use, we'll also be dealing with quite a bit more sludge. Next slide. Construction actually began the end of August 2019 with driving piles. Next slide. And there's a total of 63 piles underneath that addition just because of the soil conditions aren't favorable to build anything substantial on. Next slide. The walls were started and finished installation in January of last year. Next slide. And next slide. The steel and equipment installation has been ongoing since then. You can go through the next two, Kyle. And the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, more chemical storage is needed. You saw one of the new silos being delivered. Here's our gang of 4 silos. The 2 on the left are the existing silos, which are staying. They're 50-ton silos. The 2 new silos to the right are 100-ton silos. We're essentially tripling the volume of storage. Next slide. These are the existing lime slakers. There are 2 of them. Slaking is the term we use to describe the process of adding water to a dry chemical to form a slurry. And then the slurry is added to the basin of water and mixed in for pH adjustment. These are conventional lime slakers, and they're somewhat of a Rube Goldberg contraption. They use the weight of the dry chemical to regulate feed, and by design they use extra chemical to ensure that the slurry is at its maximum strength. Next slide. Current slaking technology is what is called batch slaking, and if you can go to the next one, Kyle. So instead of using that weight and with the conventional lime slaker, a batch slaker is filled with water. It's a stainless steel vat, and then chemical is added to the water, and we know the precise temperature at which these chemicals are 100% effective and slaked into the water, so there's very little waste. They're a lot more efficient. Next slide. So we're raising the pH to 11, and of course we got to lower that after softening. So we want to bring it back down to about a pH of 8. And to do this, we use carbon dioxide. Right now, we use carbon dioxide, but with the new process, we'll use about 10 times as much. So those two horizontal white tanks, the one on the right is an existing CO2 storage unit, about a 20-ton, and it's got an identical one added for this. Next slide. This is a new carbon dioxide feed unit. What we're using right now, the pump and the way we're doing it now just wouldn't be able to provide enough CO2 to the water to get the pH down in a timely fashion. Next slide. This, just a picture showing there's plenty of new control panels going in. Next. This would be one of the 2 sludge presses that are currently in the plant. The purpose of the presses is to dewater sludge created by softening. So we're adding slurry to adjust pH, to raise the pH so these things, all this can settle out. And what settles out is what we refer to as sludge. So the sludge is pressed in these presses. And if you go to the next slide, the goal is to create a cake, which is dropped into trucks and hauled out to farm fields or livestock yards. It's the cake we try to get to be 65% solid, which is a chalky substance, as you see. And the new process is going to create 2.5 times more sludge. So if we can go to the next picture. This is a picture of the sludge thickener as it stands as of Friday. And its primary purpose is to provide storage for this extra sludge. The secondary purpose, if you go to the next slide, is also to dewater the sludge more before being pumped into the presses. We currently pump about a sludge of 10% solid into the press. And inside this sludge thickener, it'll give the sludge more chance to settle out and get to about a 20%, maybe 25% solid. You know, the main reason or theory behind this being let gravity press instead of electricity. Next slide. To date, the only real issue we've had so far is a dump that was found when we were excavating for the sludge thickener. A lot of concrete, bricks, pipe, fire hydrant, wire, tires. There's about 40 tires found in there. Next slide. Actually, that was a foundation for an old well house was buried in there. Have the plans. It's a 10 by 10 foot foundation, and I've got a set of plans from 1933 when that thing was built. We just lost the foundation for a few years. Next slide. It's a fairly massive crater and all. We'll go to the. So it took a while to excavate this, and the reason why there was a month extension given on the project because of that debris that was found and needed to be hauled away, with more aggregate needed to be hauled in. Next one. This would be foundation prep for it. Next. the floor of the sludge thickener being poured. This is a picture showing the interior, the forms for the walls. Next. A shot of the exterior forms and a pumper truck pouring the walls of the sludge thickener. Next. What it looked like when the forms were removed and before it was backfilled. Next. Just be the catwalk being installed inside. Next. Roof beams being installed. Next. And of course, with a project like this, there's plenty of piping involved. So there was a lot of trenches dug out in that whole area behind the plant. You can't see from the highway has been excavated quite a bit. Next slide. Should be our last slide. And if things keep going to plan, the start of the softening process will start this late in winter. It's expected to take a few months to gradually soften down to the 8 to 10 grain per gallon range. To avoid shocking the distribution system, we want to do this in a gradual step down manner because we don't want the water looking like coffee. And this spring, the word should be getting out for people to turn down their softeners. For those who soften, should only need about a quarter of the amount of salt that's being used now. And I guess I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Greg.
Yeah, thank you. Jeff, so the well house that you found from the 30s, what was the well that served?
That was MMU, the city of Marshall on this site has had wells out there since I think they bought the land in 33 with a project to install, I believe, 5 wells on the property. And that water was pumped raw to the existing MMU site where it was treated, on this current site of MMU's, it was actually ion exchange softened for a while.
So was that well still there then? That was part of that house? No,
it was just the foundation.
Got it. Okay. That could have been a nightmare and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Any other questions for Jeff? If not, Jeff, do you want to say anything about the upcoming public education about the water softeners, or that's still in the planning process?
We want to get closer to date to the point that we know we're all the way there. We don't want to have people to stage down their softening. We want to get to the point where we're there or know when we're going to be there to really get the word out so people aren't playing with their softeners multiple times. And in working with Jason and his group, what we're looking at is, we'll get the word out, social media, traditional media. We'll be in correspondence, obviously, with the softening companies. And then, the carrot here is for people to use less salt and save money on that end. So the chloride limit as people turn down softeners will be measured at the wastewater plant. And that'll essentially be the first phase of the campaign to reduce the chloride. And then from there, we've talked about different ways of further, if that doesn't get us to where we need to be, further incentives, further inspections, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
We'll move then to agenda item number 9, consider the request for proposals to conduct a classification and compensation study. I'll turn to Sheila Dubs, Human Resource Director, to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, staff are requesting council consideration for us to initiate a request for proposals to conduct a class and compensation study. Our most recent study was completed in 2012 and implemented by the city in 2013. Prior to that, our most recent study was completed in 2017. The past two studies have included the city employees, library, and public housing, full and part-time regular positions. The studies have not included our paid on-call or temporary seasonal positions. At the conclusion of the last study in 2012, we received direction from the council to conduct another study approximately every 5 years to ensure that the city maintains equitable wages and remains in compliance with the Pay Equity Act. We have included the study as a proposed budget item since 2017. However, due to budget constraints, the studies haven't been approved. An approval decision this evening by the council would not require a commitment to performing a study. Rather, an approval decision tonight would provide staff with direction to initiate the RFP process only. If you do approve, I would return to the council with the proposals received at a future meeting, and the council could then decide whether to approve or decline to proceed with a study at that time. If a study is approved by the council, the timing would be beneficial for union negotiations. Each of our 3 union contracts will expire on December 31st of 2021. The council will be asked to consider new contracts for each bargaining unit, and having knowledge of the market survey data would be highly beneficial in negotiating those contracts. I listed several other positive outcomes of performing a study in your background memo. When I talked with the executive director of public housing and the library director, I did ask them if they wanted their entities to be again included in the study if it were approved. Both directors said yes, but both directors were also concerned with costs of a study. For the past 2 studies, the one in 2006 and 7, and then the one in 2011 and 12, the city paid for the study itself, but the library and the Public Housing Commission were responsible for the costs of implementation of those studies when their respective boards accepted the recommendations. Based on the concerns of the public housing director and the library director, I have included a request within the RFP for a firm to quote each of these entities separately. However, if the council intends to pay for the cost of the study in its entirety, as it has in the past 2 studies, I would remove the quote requests from the RFP before I send it out. One other highlight that I wanted to bring to your attention in the RFP is that I have identified that the city is open to a new type of job evaluation system. The city is required to have all of our positions evaluated for points under Minnesota's pay equity law. We have been utilizing the pay point factor method of pointing for as far back as I can find records. However, there are several other methods that are acceptable as well, and some firms have developed their own systems. For example, Baker Tilly, which is formerly Springstead, have created their own system that's called the SAFE system, which stands for the Systematic Analysis and Factor Evaluation. So by opening this option up, it will provide opportunity for the city to receive quotes from other firms that may not utilize the Hay Point Factor method. Hopefully we still receive at least one quote from a firm that does provide that method for the council to choose from. I have budgeted the funding to pay for the study, and I'm hopeful that the quotes will come in lower than the budget projections. At this time, unfortunately, I'm unable to project an estimated implementation cost if the council would proceed with selection of a firm to complete the study in 2021. The Personnel Committee has met and they approved to bring this item to the full council for consideration. Again, if the council were to decide to approve the RFP process this evening, I would like direction on whether or not to request the 2 additional pricing quotes related to public housing and the library entities. And I'll certainly open up for questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Any comments from the Personnel Committee?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to comment. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
John, you can go first.
Okay, really speak in favor of doing this study. As mentioned, we've got several contracts coming up at the end of the year. This is going to take approximately a year to complete this study. And, we need to know where everyone is in the market. I think I mentioned this before in a work session that, individuals know roughly where they're at within their own market. We don't necessarily know where everybody else is in the market, and that's what we need to find out what that is before we go into negotiations and discussions, and just to know that we are doing things in an equitable nature. So I do look for approval of this.
And Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, John. Yeah, we did discuss this, and I think the timing is good, and I'm in support of the city doing the full thing. I'd prefer not to see it broken out into library and the housing. I think we should just do it inclusive, and those entities can be responsible for the implementation. But I think it's prudent to study it as a whole, and there's probably an overall cost savings in doing that in one proposal rather than three.
Other input?
I have 3 questions to start with here. At the present time, do we have any reason to believe that our present compensation schedule is not fair? Do we have any indication that we needed correcting this schedule?
We have indication that some of our positions are below market. Yes.
The second question, do cities such as Tracy, Cottonwood, Redwood Falls, do they pay for classification and compensation studies like the one being proposed?
I'm not familiar with those communities. They are not in our comparable group, but all municipalities in the state of Minnesota are required to comply with the Minnesota Pay Equity Act. So how they would accomplish that, I can't say for certain. I'm not familiar because they're smaller communities.
The third question, I know that some cities look at the League of Minnesota Cities survey information regarding salaries and fringe benefits. And I assume that's how they use to determine whether their salaries are in line with comparable cities. Would that be something that'd be sufficient enough or not?
In my opinion, is not sufficient enough. We receive HR coordinators, HR managers typically receive a request to update that survey information once a year. When cities have either union groups or their non-union groups settle contracts or wages change, the updates on those may not be timely. And some communities don't respond to that survey. So while we do, the city of Marshall has responded since I've worked here. Some of our comparable group cities do not participate in that survey. So we would be missing information from those. So I would be concerned on 2 points. One about the accuracy of the data, and the other that some of our comparable cities aren't responding to that. The other point I would make on that is that with the library group and the public housing group, we will generally not see those positions surveyed through that League of Minnesota Cities survey. So we would be missing those types of positions.
Other input?
I have just a quick question. This is the request quotes on it. This is not actually there's nothing other than requesting quotes on what it would cost to do the survey at this point, correct?
You are correct.
I would bring back a summary of the responses received for the council to select a consultant and proceed if that was what the council wishes to do.
So at this point, there's no financial obligation from the city of Marshall.
There is not.
Thank you.
Any other input? If not, you have the recommendation. Is there a motion?
I'd make a motion to approve the request for proposal and conduct a classification and compensation study to include both the library and the
Public housing.
public housing. Thank you.
Second that.
Motion by John, seconded by Craig. Discussion?
The only discussion I'll have is at this point, I'll support us getting quotes for it. I just want everybody to be leery of what budget we may, or what situation we may be in 3 or 4 months. Hopefully it's a good situation. Hopefully that vaccine that Pfizer came up, everybody's getting shots and we're back at it. But I do worry financially where we'll be in 4 months. I will support getting quotes for it.
Any other discussion?
I have a few comments here. It's stated in our materials and was mentioned again tonight that this study will be beneficial for union negotiations. I'm not convinced that it will help. What would be beneficial in union negotiations if we have tough negotiators negotiating the new contracts? I personally believe the city has not been tough enough in salary negotiations. We need to be tougher. It's taxpayers' money we're spending. And this is a difficult year for our national, state, and local economies. Of all years, this is not a time to incur unnecessary expenditures. The cost of the proposal is estimated to be $30,000 to $35,000. And then once you have the study, there might be some implementation costs that run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Again, this is not a time to incur unnecessary expenditures. I personally believe that if we do the studies, it would not be a good use of taxpayer money. In making decisions like this, if you have a choice, you should only do something if the benefits exceed the costs. It's my personal opinion that the cost of this study will clearly outweigh any benefits we'll get from it. And so I'll be voting against the proposal.
Other discussion on the motion?
Can I comment a little bit?
Sharon?
We did go to arbitration and we lost. I just want to bring that up. I want to state that, and maybe it was worth losing, but you have to weigh your options on negotiations on whether or not you're going to be successful. The last time we were not successful, and I can tell you that the city of Marshall was viewed by almost every other local unit of government in terms of that arbitration award. I just want to make that. The second thing is we have had many comments from council members about adding steps to a pay plan. How do we go about adding steps to a pay plan, ensuring integrity of the pay plan, and also complying with pay equity? There's no other private entity that needs to comply with pay equity like we do. How do you do that without consulting with a firm that specializes in this? So I'm not sure about the timing of the compensation plan. I mean, I do agree that I'm a little concerned about it, personally, just because of where we're at. But in terms of pay equity compliance, adding steps, we can't do it without a consultant. The current consultant, I'm not sure how long that individual is going to rate jobs and their job descriptions. That's also a concern. We use someone now. How long will that system, so to speak, lead us into the future? I'm not sure. So that's another reason to look at this. I can speak to the timing a little bit. Let's see how it goes. If we feel that we need to extend the study in some ways to get past some of the COVID things, I think that's something we may consider as well. So I don't want to get too deep into it because it may get into union negotiation discussion, but I just want to bring up some of those points.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor?
Yes, Craig.
Yeah, I'd like to comment too. I think I'm mixed emotion about a comment that says that we're not a tough enough negotiator, because I look at how we hire and treat and maintain employees, and having the lowest cost employee is not always the best on the bottom line of the business. You know, bringing in employees, we can bring employees in, keep the pay to the bottom half of the scale and feel like we're doing a really good job, get them trained up a little bit, find out what they're really worth as we watch them go somewhere else. Then we bring in another one and spend the money to train, end up working with somebody who may or may not be as experienced and may or may not get as good a quality piece. And I look at our policing, I look at our specialty talents. There's a lot of these jobs that aren't just general labor. They come with degrees, with licensure, with training, with maintaining training, and having legitimate and legacy employees has a value. So you put out an expectation, you do a good job of evaluating, you weed out the ones that aren't worth the money that they make, and then you take care of those employees. So I think it's easy to say that we're not tough enough negotiator if you only think that the best thing is to get it as absolutely cheap as possible. But that's not, I don't think, a good equitable way to run your business.
Greg, and I will add to that with you. As an employer, I will tell you, I am not the cheapest. My guys are not the lowest paid employees, because you're 100% correct. I would honestly say I have some of the highest paid employees in my trade, and they're very loyal employees, and you actually save money doing that. I have employees that have been with me now since I started 14 years ago. I have 4 of them, and they've looked for jobs, and they're like, they get paid very well. So it is not necessarily the cheapest is the best. And again, the point I was making is we're not voting to approve to do the study. We are voting tonight to see what the study will cost, which I think it's good to look at what the cost is. I may not support the cost in 3 months, but if we don't know what it's going to cost, then then we don't even know what we're doing. So I think it's good to look at what the cost is going to be.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Well,
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Steve?
So I'm going to speak supporting Councilmember Lazinski. I think that, I don't know where I stand on this. Again, I agree with Councilman Bearcola that the timing may not be the best, but we have no control over the timing. We had no control over this pandemic. The union negotiations are coming up, and that's a given. I'd like to know further information of what the study will cost, and I'd like to know the specifics of what the study is going to give us, what information it's going to give us. And if it's worth its weight, then I might vote for it. If it's not, well, I might not. But like Councilmember Lazinski said, a request for proposals is just that. We get more information to see what's it going to cost us.
I would like to respond to 2 of the comments that were made. One is about the salary schedule and implementing more steps. I was the council member that proposed that. Now, I'm not necessarily proposing that we increase the top or bottom of our salary schedule. All I'm saying is we should have more steps, but they should be smaller steps. And we have a certain number of steps now. All you have to do is increase the amount and go from the bottom to the top. But each year you would get a smaller step increase, but there's still the cost of living increase. So each year you get the cost of living increase and the step increase. And what I'm proposing is simply increase the number of steps. And I don't think that type of thing is that complicated if you leave the top and the bottom salaries in the schedule the way they are right now. The second comment I would make is, yeah, there was arbitration, I believe, with the unions, one of the unions or 2 of the unions, and we lost that. But then we turned around and increased the salaries of all the other employees, even though we had agreements with some of those employees ahead of time. And so that doesn't seem like it being tough in negotiations. When we arrive at a fair contract with our employees and then later turn around and increase it, simply because one of the groups supposedly is being underpaid. So I do think we can be tougher in negotiations. And it doesn't mean that we underpay our employees. We want to pay them fair salaries. But I was looking at a study back in 1992 by Mark Dayton, who is the auditor for the state of Minnesota. And he was talking about how good it is in some sense to be a government employee with the salaries, the retirement plans, the benefits, and so forth. So there's a lot of pluses to being a government employee. And we owe it to our citizens to make sure we're not overpaying our employees. And I'm not saying we underpay them. Nobody's advocating that. But I'm concerned that we make decisions where we're overpaying the employees and paying them more than we need to and more than what is justified. So I want that clear. And like I said, I'm not trying to lowball our employees or treat them unfairly. But at the same time, we're spending somebody else's money and we need to be careful with it. And I know some people expressed concerns that we ended up with kind of a bad deal with union negotiations. Well, let's stop that thing from happening in the future. We need to be tough when we go into negotiations. That's what I'm saying.
Mayor, may I respond to a comment about the step schedule?
Sheila?
Thank you. Just for those that may be listening to this conversation, it is true that employees' wages do increase on the step schedule when they're in steps with a step and a general wage increase. But that stops when they reach the top of the scale, which is after 6 years of employment. So our employees that have been with us longer than 6 years, and we have employees that have been with us for almost 40 years. Once you reach that 6th year mark, you are capped. There are no more increases. It's only a general wage increase after that. So there are not 2 increases per year. That is only for the first 6 years on our current system.
And John, you had a comment?
Yeah, a couple of comments. One, really in agreement with Glenn that we don't want to overpay and we don't want to underpay our employees, but this is really how we find out what it is across the board on all of our employees. And the second thing I'd like to point out is we just had, updates, item number 4 and item number, 8. We're talking $25 million worth of improvements we're making to our city that's going to be operated by city employees. We not only want to pay those individuals fairly, we want to make sure that we have experienced, good employees and that we can keep them. To me, the measure of success on this study is not how we get through a negotiation. It's how we keep the employees afterwards, because we've got, like Sheila said, a lot of experience out there, a lot of good people working out there. Those are the people we want to keep, and we want to make sure we're in the market doing that.
Thank you, John. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, I'll draw us to a vote on the motion. Kyle, would you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
No.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
No.
Jim Lozinski.
Yes, and Kyle, I need to make a note that I need to take off to take care of something, so I'll be leaving the meeting now, but yes on that motion.
Motion does pass. Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
We'll move then to agenda item number 10, request for a map amendment, rezoning by Vesta LLC, location 512 Continental Street. Jason?
Mayor, I believe Ilya Gutman is on the line to handle this item.
Oh, thank you. Ilya?
Thank you, Mayor Council. So this one is relatively easy. It's one lot that is requested to be rezoned for the future house construction. It's right next to the rest of the R1 single-family housing zoning district. And recommendation from staff and planning commission is to confirm this rezoning. It was introduced in the last council meeting, and this recommendation is to approve.
Any questions for Ilya? I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, Kyle, would you take the vote?
Mayor Burns,
Abstain?
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt,
Yes.
And the motion does pass. Agenda item number 11. The West Redwood Street, West Marshall Street reconstruction project. The action item would be to consider the resolution receiving the feasibility report and calling for a hearing on the improvement. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor. This proposed project is a complete reconstruct of North First Street, Redwood Street, and Marshall Street. bounded by First and College Drive. You can see on the map attached there. Complete reconstruct of the surfacing and all of the utilities beneath. So there's water main, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer throughout the project limits. It will be replaced. I would note that on Marshall Street, it'd be sanitary sewer only. We've replaced water main through there in the past and the not so distant past. There's undersized water main in this area. I believe we've got 4-inch cast iron through quite a bit of the project area, and that's unacceptable by today's standards. Wherever we've got that in place, where it's on our target and our list to get that upsized and material changed. You'll note that Lion Street is not considered in these project limits or not being proposed. It was considered. Staff at this point in time is proposing to leave that out of the project limits as Block 11 and discussions continue to develop. We're not entirely sure what we would like to see there and what the council may want to see for a street width or utility service there until we know more about what might develop. And we believe the road surface will be fine to wait as we make that decision at a later date. So for now, we're proposing just to pull that out, but reconstruct the rest of the project limits on this side of College Drive and Main Street. Engineers estimate at this point in time is 1.4 million. The project would be proposed to be specially assessed per our most current policy. And we would propose to have a public hearing at your next council meeting. And I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Questions for Jason?
Jason, this is Russ again. Just on page 71 under 3.0 proposed improvements. If Kyle, you want to go to that? You've got a 1 foot grass buffer in all off of the sidewalks. 1 foot grass buffers. I mean, pretty narrow. Why would we even do that? Why would we put a 1 foot grass buffer around all that? I mean, you can't. I mean, it's hard to mow. It's hard to grow grass at 1 foot. It's just, to me, it doesn't make sense.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Councilman. And I'll also touch on street widths. It's a good reminder for me. So the grass buffer probably should have been written a different way. I think all that we're trying to explain there is that the sidewalk will be set 1 foot off the property line. So for now, it'll remain, well, on those streets, it'll be, so I'm just looking at which streets were listed. I was thinking about Lion, but we pulled that out. But that's just, what that's indicating is that the sidewalk will be set into the right of way 1 foot, which is typical of all of our sidewalk and all of our projects. So that 1 foot grass will actually be whatever their front yard is. It won't just be 1 foot strip of grass. It'll be a significant amount of grass there. And then as far as street widths go, I should just touch on that. We're proposing street widths that are, I would say, largely the same or very similar to what's out there today in this area. Marshall Street is proposed to be largely similar, if not exactly the same in width. Redwood Street, we're proposing a 2 foot narrowing from 40 feet to 38 feet. North First is the same from Marshall to Lion, but 4 foot narrower between along Block 11 between Lion and Main there. So largely the same. The one block that sees the biggest change is North First between Lion and Main Street. And that's a 4 foot narrowing, where that was I think a 44 foot wide section or 42, and we're putting it to a 38. So thank you. And I'll entertain any other questions.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Steve.
On the street width, we just voted on a proposal earlier over on Camden and James to drop it down to 36. And the argument was to save money. So why are we doing 38 and not going to 36?
It was our belief that in this area with the high-rise apartments, the Block 11 development, the bank traffic, the quite a bit of on-street parking, that the additional 1 foot for each travel lane was an important consideration here. So this proposal is 2 11-foot travel lanes with 2 8-foot parking lanes, where James was 2 10-foot travel lanes with 2 8-foot parking lanes. We could certainly entertain a little narrower width if the council wishes.
And there's good points there. You know, you've got increased traffic and commercial traffic, but you've also got a lot more parking space too. And Block 11 development is the big question mark. So, but
Yes,
I wouldn't imagine that most of the traffic would come off of First Street. It would come off of either College or Main.
Yes, Councilman, we think that these streets are, while generally low volume, just a little bit higher use than James and a little bit more need for the width. This whole width discussion is also a big factor in why Lion Street got dropped off of this project, because we have a hard time coming forward and telling you we need, you know, perpendicular parking on one side and parallel on the other and this wide of lanes when we don't know what's going on there. You know, there might be development of a certain type that doesn't require that width, and we don't want to feel like we wasted the money. So there's that facet of the project, and then the utility portion where if they do a development that requires utility service closer to College Drive, we would be unprepared to serve them if we went through with the project as we were going to right now.
Right. And just and at PI&T, that Lion Street potential had a lot of really good discussion, and there is so much unknown and so many variables. I think that dropping that for right now is an excellent decision. There's no critical infrastructure upgrades that need to happen right now that would push us to move forward on that. And I think that's a good decision.
Right.
And with that, I'd make a motion that we approve this.
Motion by Craig. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by John. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just a question again for Jason on Lion Street. And Craig made reference to no infrastructure, but we will probably address it before 2025 when the construction on College Drive, because they're going to do infrastructure there. Is that correct? Would there be a possibility that we'll address that before 2025?
There's a possibility, but on that particular section, we really wouldn't have to. There's more of a need on Redwood and Marshall. And then as we got into analyzing some of the sanitary sewer in that area, things weren't quite how we thought they were with what we had for options available to us. So I would say there might not be a specific need to do Lion before College Drive. I don't think we'll have to do that. It is still important to get this project done before the College Drive portion due to some sanitary sewer changes we'll be making, but I don't think Lion will need to be done.
Thank you, Jason. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, Kyle?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Craig Schaefer,
Yes.
Steve Meister,
Yes.
Glenn Bearcooler,
Yes.
John DeCramer,
Yes.
Russ Labatt.
Yes.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 12 is the statement of annual performance evaluation for the city administrator. So earlier this evening, late this afternoon, the city council did meet, and for the purposes of the annual performance review, and I'll read into the record the statement that summarizes that meeting. Sharon Hansen began employment as Marshall City Administrator November 16th, 2017. Each year on or about the anniversary of the start of her employment as administrator, the City Council conducts a review of the administrator's performance. In 2020, a process referred to as the 360-degree feedback was utilized. The process utilized performance input from the City Council, from peers, direct reports, and community members. The list of those invited to participate in the 360 feedback was approved by the City Council Personnel Committee. 30 individuals provided input, 6 City Council, 11 peers / direct reports, and 13 community members. The feedback was provided in 7 categories, which are knowledge / strategic, character, interpersonal, innovation / change, building talent, leadership, motivation, and execution. Multiple aspects were considered under each category for a total of 81 areas rated. Ratings were on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. Overall raw score was 3.7 or higher in each category. Strongest categories were knowledge / strategic and innovation / change. When compared to the thousands of others who have been evaluated using This instrument's Sharon Hansen is above average in all categories. The 360-degree feedback and review by the City Council finds Sharon Hansen, City Administrator performance meets or exceeds expectations in all categories. Thank you. I would be open to any other comments that the City Council has. If not, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
We'll move then to the commission liaison reports. Actually, from my standpoint, the Fire Relief Association did meet since our last meeting. They anticipate 2 retirements coming up on or about the end of the year. The performance of the relief fund, which is their retirement system, is performing well. The Regional Development Commission will meet this Thursday afternoon. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine have not met since we've last met.
Steve?
Likewise, mine have not met since we've last met.
Glenn?
The Public Housing Commission decided not to hold a meeting this month. Instead, our next meeting will be in December. But the Planning Commission did meet, and they met to discuss the exterior finish for our new City Hall remodeling project. The City Hall is located in the Central Heritage District, and by ordinance, it's only allowed to have certain exterior finishes. And one of the exterior finishes that the city is going to use is not listed in the ordinance. And so the Planning Commission met and approved that exterior finish. And this is an action that does not have to go in front of the City Council. If it's approved by the Planning Commission, that's good enough. Okay, that's it for my report.
Okay. John?
EDA Housing had a subcommittee meeting that took place. Also note in the bills that were paid, the numerous care payments that went out to businesses in town again. MMU, there was a partnership meeting going over the payment in lieu of taxes and agreement with MMU. That will come to the City Council future meeting. That's getting wrapped up. And then just to note, there's also a diversity committee meeting that took place in the past about a week ago. No, a week and more, about 10 days ago. And that probably start hearing a little bit more about in the process of getting a little bit more organized as a separate committee, possibly getting a little bit more recognition through the city on that, and trying to set up our vision, mission statements. We've got a temporary, or at least start of a co-chair now going, so things are starting to move along a little bit in that area.
Thank you, John. Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Police Advisory Board met yesterday, and we were able to conduct interviews for the sergeant position with 3 internal candidates, and made our recommendation to Director of Public Safety Jim Marshall, who will proceed with the next steps. So that should be brought forth hopefully before the council within the next couple of months, I would guess. Marshall Lyon County Library Board met yesterday, and as expected, they continue to deal with the COVID situation. Ballatin and Cottonwood branches remain closed at this time. The Ballatin director or manager is retiring, and we believe that the Ballatin Council met last night to maybe authorize that a replacement for the Ballatin location. Along with COVID, Michelle continues to monitor the employees' exposure to COVID with people coming in or even outside of the library, family members, whatever the case would be, and possible effects on the library operations. At certain times, they've had more than one employee out because of exposure. Most of it's been of exposure, not the actual COVID virus itself. They're going to start a campaign with about the drive-up window usage, and that should be started shortly. And they want to maybe make sure that people are utilizing it more. And we're also in discussions about staying open a little bit later, one night a week, because they have had some calls or requests to stay open past 5 o'clock when people get off work. So that's all I have for the library, and CVB has not met. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Jim. Oh, Jim left the meeting. So we'll move then to agenda item number 14, council member individual items. Russ?
I have, the only thing I have, Mr. Mayor, is that when my morning walks, I try to walk down First Street, and just to relate to Jason and the engineering staff, the residents seem to be fairly happy. Hopefully we can get a layer of asphalt on that before the snow on First Street, but they seem to be pretty satisfied with the progress of that construction. Thank you.
And Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing.
Steve?
I have quite a bit, actually. And again, I'm going to put my medical hat on about COVID. We have had a lot of COVID. Our hospitals are full. And when I say our hospitals are full, it comes from two reasons. We've had a lot of hospitals that have a lot of fullness, meaning their beds are completely full. And then other hospitals are full, not because all their beds are full, but because they have as many patients as they can take, given the staff that is out. And so the staff that's left, it restricts the numbers that we take, and we're no different. And so, people can argue about mask wearing. The fact of the matter is it works, but we have to be smart about it. I had to take a trip down to Sioux Falls the other day, and the amount of mask wearing there compared to here is laughable. They don't really do it down in South Dakota, and that's one of the reasons that we're so full. We're seeing surges. The governor made his announcements today about shutting down bars after 10 o'clock and some other rules. We know that the schools are going to go all virtual starting, I think, Thursday or tomorrow. So this is just one of those things. Keep in mind, be graceful. We did open, there's Lyon County is in a free test situation with a test kit from the Minnesota Department of Health, where you order it, you give them your address, and they send you one of these testing kits that's saliva based. You spit into it. You have to have a virtual visit. It's through the Vault company, and you get your results back. Avera is doing a drive-up testing center again. We opened that up today at the Carlson Street Clinic, and there was almost 150 people seen in that time, which takes the pressure off of the clinic. So we're happy for that. But please, I just wish everybody would be cognizant that COVID is not gone. It is still here and surging, and it's not unique to Marshall. It's not unique to Minnesota. It's not unique to South Dakota. It's the entire upper Midwest, and I would argue the entire country is seeing a secondary surge. The good news is, that's the bad news. The good news, which we always like to finish with, is that there is progress on vaccines. They're supposed to be coming. They're pushing them hard. They're pushing them fast. Again, you want a vaccine to be efficacious and safe. And it looks like there is a whole bunch of them that are in the running for this. They say it might even come for the first phase of distribution by the end of the year. I'm not going to hold my breath for that, but we can be hopeful. And we'll see. So we'll go from there.
Doc, what are the hours on the drive-up clinic at Carlson? Is that 9 to 1?
Yeah, 9 to 1. But given the numbers, we may have to change that a little bit. And just have grace. Today, apparently the line was almost an hour, a little over an hour for waiting. And we just want people to have grace in waiting, because they either wait there or they wait in the clinic. And waiting is a pain, but remember that getting tested, when you get swabbed, you're going to wait for that test result anyway. And that's the other thing that people really need to know, and I have to really emphasize. If people think that they've been exposed, a negative test does not mean you get to go back and do what you want to do. It means you still have to quarantine for the full 14 days. By having a negative test, if you had a really high risk exposure, A negative test means nothing, especially if you don't have any symptoms. Now, if you have symptoms and it's negative, that's a different ballgame. But if you have no symptoms and you have a negative test and you had a really high risk exposure, you still have to quarantine for the full 14 days.
Thank you,
That was
Dr.
all.
Meister.
Yep.
Thank you. And Glenn.
I would just like to remind everyone tomorrow's Veterans Day and make sure you take time to honor our veterans. That's all I have.
Thank you, Glenn. I just have two items. One is, special recognition to Kyle Box, who was our local election official, as well as all the other people who worked at our 3 polling places to administer the election process. It was, from all accounts, it went smoothly and it was well managed. So thank you, Kyle, for your efforts as well as those of your staff. We did receive the sales and use tax results for August. There's always a lag on this because so the August is the most recent, which arrived today. Somewhat surprisingly, comparing August 2019 to August 2020, sales tax receipts were up 3.5%. I think that that's a statement to show the kind of the vitality and the innovation of our business community in Marshall, as Marshall does serve the region also. With that, let's move then to staff reports. Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I do want to update the council that I stated we were going to review CARES Act funding and payments at this meeting, but we're still doing a few more final payments from November 1st through 15th, and we will present some final numbers to you at the last meeting in November. And John Kramer mentioned a little bit about EDA grants. We did award or pay out approximately $529,000 of business grants through the CARES Act. So it's very, very helpful to our business community in terms of that funding. One other item and follow up to Dr. Meister's presentation on COVID. We do plan on having a discussion this week with our Emergency Management Director, Jim Marshall, and our mayor, just to kind of review once again our pandemic planning, which relates a lot about city operations and staff redundancy in terms of what do we do when we have loss of staff. We too have been an organization in the last several weeks who have had or seen maybe greater impact with COVID exposures than we have at any other time since the beginning of March. So we are affected as an organization as well with community spread. So it's very important to stay vigilant on behalf of the city of Marshall and all the services we provide. So that is all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sharon.
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Sharon, do you want to give since Jim had to leave the meeting, you want to give just a quick update on City Hall regarding mainstay and maybe for other council members, because we did approve that mainstay, or maybe John?
Yes.
Yep.
We did have a City Hall committee meeting last week. We do still currently meet every other week. We had a engineering design from Bob St. Aubin and his firm that he typically contracts with. He, my understanding, did do some construction on mainstay to at least stabilize it, and we are now nearing the point where we're determining the final surface of that wall. There's still some work for City Hall committee to decide between ephes and fiber cement. I think the cost is going to be very, very close for either one, but yet we really want to decide on that. In terms of City Hall, I know that they had a construction update on Monday. I wasn't able to attend. And I'm still waiting for the meeting notes from that. Ray Hendrickson and Scott Vandermillen were able to attend. I did not have an opportunity to talk to them today. I know that some of you have commented that the southeast wall has been enclosed, that you have seen some windows being installed, which according to the construction schedule, Southwest Glass, who is the subcontractor, this is the week where we're going to start seeing some windows installed. So if you did see that today, that seems to be in line with what we projected for a construction schedule. So lots of discussion on cost estimates for the southeast wall. We still do not have final numbers. We hope to get that by the end of this week, and we will then share that with the committee, of course, and hopefully the council. So we've only had from way back when really an earlier estimate of that. So I'm probably leaving out a lot of that. I don't know if Council Member DeCramer or if Council Member Labatt want to comment further.
Actually, I don't have too much more to add. That's a good update on it. It's good to see the walls more enclosed with the sheathing on it. So especially with the weather that we're getting now, keep that out. I think it's my understanding they're going to start to put some heat on the inside and start raising the temperature so they could start doing the sheetrock in the next week or two. So things are going to move along, but they got to get the windows in to close it up. So it looks like that's happening. And like I said, we did finally get action on the mainstay wall that's up and going. We just need to look at the finish now.
Very good. Thank you. Now, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. Not a lot to report. I think I would just offer a quick construction update and mention that South 4th Street, some of you may have noticed the pavement and the final pavement is in place. So that project is largely completed. There's still some black dirt work and seeding work that would need to occur. The black dirt work and some temporary stabilization will occur yet this fall, and final seeding next year, and final shaping as needed and minor adjustments. But largely concrete and pavement are in place, utilities are done, and we think it looks pretty good. Thank you for the comment, Councilman Labatt, about South First. They are still progressing on that project. Most, if not all, the curb and gutters in place. They are hopeful that they'll be getting some pavement down as early as the end of this week. The amount of snow on the ground will kind of dictate that, but the weather looks like we'll get a few more good days yet, and we would hope to get some pavement down and keep progressing on concrete driveways. Their intent is to keep working to get this thing finished, and we'll keep working with them along the way. And I think that's all I've got, unless there are questions.
Any questions for Jason? If not, Dennis?
No report.
Okay. The remaining items on the agenda, the administrative brief, they're for the council's review, as well as the information items, including the building permits. Is there anything else to come forward this meeting? If not, is there
actually a question kind of goes back in your topic, but really back to Kyle is any issues at all with the election? Things go as smooth as they appeared, and with all the numbers and everything else?
The day's over, I guess. We'll just start with that. Overall, it was a good day. We started off a little rough right at 7 a.m. We opened the polls, and about 10 seconds later, all of our registration check-in poll pads crashed. It ended up crashing statewide. And then we were down for an extra hour in Lyon County until about 10 o'clock or so in the morning. So we had to result back to our paper rosters for the first part of the day. But after that was resolved, it was just kind of do the backfill, and it ended up being a good day, a busy day. Just on Marshall's turnout was 89.14%, so high turnout for the city. That's both in-person and mail-in ballots, or absentee ballots. But overall, a good day.
Do you want to point out the canvassing meeting?
Yes, City Council will meet in a special meeting on Thursday this Thursday at 3 p.m. to canvass the results of the election. Lyon County will meet at 1 p.m. that same day before issuing it to the city. So.
Okay, then just kind of last comment would be congratulations all those council members that appear to get reelected. I haven't heard of anybody requesting any recounts on that side, but and then congratulations to our mayor and getting back to your position. So
Thank you. Is there anything else to come forward this evening? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve to adjourn. Discussion? If not, by voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.